Hi guys, today's lesson is over adding and subtracting fractions. Before we begin with that, one term is going to be really important that you understand, and that's the term multiples. And just to kind of refresh your memory, a multiple of a number is taking the number and multiplying it by whole numbers, okay? So an example of this, if we want to find the multiples of 5, the multiples of 5 would just be 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, and so on. How are we getting that? Well, we're just taking our number and multiplying it by whole numbers here. So 5 times 1 is 5, 5 times 2 is 10, 5 times 3 is 15, 5 times 4 is 20. So that's just kind of a refresher of multiples if you need to write that down somewhere. Okay? Think about that today and how that works there with adding and subtracting fractions. Okay? When we add and subtract fractions, guys, if the denominators are different, you must find a common denominator. If the denominators are the same, you just add or subtract the numerators and keep the denominators the same. All right? As kind of a review here, our numerator is just the top number of a fraction, and our denominator is the bottom number of the fraction. Okay, so if you need to write all this down, please do so right now. All right, moving on. Our first example is this, guys. If we have our denominator the same, for instance, this first example is 2/3 plus 1/3. Notice our bottom number 3 is the same. All right, if that's the case, your life just became a lot easier. All you have to do is keep the bottom number the same then, so you're going to write 3, and then add the numerators together. So 2 plus 1 is 3. So then our answer is 3 divided by 3, or 1. Okay? But we know life is not always that easy. Let's go ahead and take a look at an example. Again, if you need to pause this and write these down, please do so. We're going to look at the first example here. And the first example here is this. We have 2/4 plus 1/6. And the first step I would recommend doing is this, is that you find common multiples of 4 and 6, in particular the least common multiples. So remember, I'm just going to find multiples by taking 4 times 1, which is 4, times 2, which is 8, times 3, which is 12, times 4, which is 16. All right, and I'm just going to list those. So I listed 4, 8, 12, 16. I might have to list more if I need to. The multiples of 6 are 6, 12, 18, 24, and so on. But if I look here, I see that 12 is common in both a common multiple of both 4 and 6, and it is also the least common multiple there. Okay, so I'm going to use now 12 as my denominator for both 2/4 and when I add that to 1/6, and here's what I mean. If I look here, I now have 2/4, and I'm going to multiply that by some number to get 12 on the bottom there. All right? And if you remember back here, I've got to think to myself, 4 times what number gives me 12? Well, I know that's 3. And if you think back here, if I multiply the bottom number times 3, so in this case, if I multiply 4 times 3, I've got to take 2 times 3 on the top. And there is that giant 1 that tells me that I am in the process of finding an equivalent fraction. All right? 4 times 3 is 12, and so 2 times 3 is 6. Again, I want my bottom numbers to be the same now. In the original problem, they were not. All right? And so now I'm going to come over and do the same thing here for 1/6. Notice I want my bottom number to be 12. All right, so 6 times what number gives me 12? Well, I know that is 2. All right, and so if I put 2 on the bottom to find my equivalent fraction, I need to put 2 on the top. And again, I'm going to go ahead here and I'm going to make my giant 1. That tells me 2 divided by 2 is 1. And again, I'm in the process of finding an equivalent fraction for 1/6. But I want the bottom number, or the denominator, to be 12. All right, I'm going to multiply the numerators now. I have 1 times 2, which is 2. And if you look here, guys, I now have 6/12 and 2/12. Now I can add those two numbers together because they have the same denominator or same bottom number. So notice this. My denominators now are going to stay the same. 12, 12, 12. I'm not going to add those together. They're just going to stay the same. What I am going to put is 6 for the first for the 2/4 there for the common fraction, or excuse me, for the equivalent fraction, I'm sorry, that I found for 2/4. And for the equivalent fraction that I found for 1/6 was 2/12. Now, since I have the same denominator, same bottom numbers, I can add my numerators together. 6 plus 2 is 8. All right? So now I see that 8/12 is my answer. Okay? And 8/12 does simplify there to 2/3. Okay? To 2/3. And we'll show you in a later lesson how it simplifies down to 2/3. So 8/12 or 2/3 is my answer. All right, let's look at a problem here. Let's look at a problem with subtraction. Let's look at a problem here with subtraction. All right, in this problem here, I have 7/8 minus 3/5. And I wrote down my common multiples of 8. 8, 16, 24, 32, and 40. I wrote down my common multiples of 5. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40. I see that my least common multiple of 8 and 5 is 40. So now I'm going to use those to find equivalent fractions for 7/8 and 3/5 so that I have the same bottom number, which in this case is 40. All right, going through the process. 8 times what number gives me 40? Well, I know that that is 5. And again, notice you're doing the same thing for subtraction as you did addition. The only difference is at the end you're going to subtract instead of add. If I put 5 on the bottom, I've got to put 5 on the top. All right? And now I have here 8 times 5, which is 40. And 7 times 5, which is 35. All right, moving on here. The next part here, 3/5. How am I going to get from 5 to 40? 5 times what number gives me 40? Well, I know 5 times 8 is 40. And so if I multiply the bottom times 8, I've got to multiply the top times 8. And 3 times 8 is 24. Okay? And just remember, just like addition, just like finding equivalent fractions there, I can put a giant 1 right around the 5 divided by 5, and I can put a giant 1 right around my 8 divided by 8. All right, both of those, 5 divided by 5 is 1, 8 divided by 8 is 1. All right, so now I am in good shape. I have 35 divided by 40, or 35 out of 40, and 25 out of 40. Or 24 out of 40, excuse me. And now I can use those two numbers there, 35 out of 40, and I can subtract now 24 out of 40 from that. All right, excuse me. And so I see now that my bottom numbers are the same. And so since my bottom number is the same, I can go ahead and subtract now. 35 minus 24 is 11. And so my answer here is 11 over 40. All right? So that is how you add and subtract fractions. Just remember, you're going to want to start, if the denominators are the same, you can just add the numerators. If the denominators are different, then you have to go through the process of finding the least common multiple and finding the common denominator. Okay, thank you guys.